Once again, we're seeing warnings about the sustainability of electric cars with used prices absolutely nosediving. This time, it's the fleet and leasing sector speaking out yesterday, saying that they're losing millions of pounds due to worse than expected, to put it politely, resale values. Today, let's dive into it and talk a bit about how the recent government response aiming to address this while it continues to miss the mark, as well as what impact the influx of Chinese electric vehicles is having. Hello, and a very warm welcome back. To begin with, I think it's important to cover just how we find ourselves in this depreciative mess. How did things get so bad that we're still seeing headlines like this? Well, firstly, it's government incentive, isn't it? From the very beginning, they made electric vehicles very attractive to businesses by allowing them to pay less tax if they bought one. In fact, the more expensive the car was, the more tax you saved with the crazy 100% capital allowance tax write-off scheme. It didn't really matter how efficient the car was, how much range it had, nothing like that. It was just purely about that purchase price, which is how we ended up with a market absolutely chock full of high-end stuff like expensive Porsche Taycans, BMW i7s and so on, all of which cost in excess of, 110,000, 120,000 pounds when they were new, and yet they're advertised for a fraction of that and still not selling. The second-hand buyer, well, by the time he comes along, he doesn't have this great tax incentive, does he? And he possibly doesn't have the luxury of just handing it back at the end of the lease deal, depending on how old it is. So how much it costs and how much it's going to depreciate by, that really matters to him, obviously. Now, as for the more everyday electric cars, not the expensive stuff, the more everyday stuff, well, they follow a similar trend. 9 out of every 10 sold last year went to either a fleet or a business buyer. That's a lot of cars, and when the lease deals expire after a few years, it means there's far more of them than the used market knows what to do with. There's far more being supplied than there's demand for, so what we end up with is prices dropping lower and lower and lower in order to try and shift them, and therein lies the problem for the lease companies. Now, whilst that's happening, it's a kind of double whammy this, isn't it? Because whilst that's happening, we've got new car dealers continually pushing their cars into the market with bigger and bigger discounts in order to try and meet that compulsory government set 28% electric sales target. Otherwise, they're going to get hit with the absolutely massive fines. So for the tiny minority who were possibly thinking about buying a used EV, financially, they're probably just as well off leasing a new one and then obviously not having to worry about that depreciation as it takes place. So what's kind of been cultivated here is a market that's very much tailored towards supplying brand new electric cars to the corporate world, with very little to incentivise people to buy the used ones once those leases expire. And what that results in is this sort of top-heavy sales cycle that we're now seeing. Don't get me wrong, I don't think there should have been any incentives in the first place, so I'm certainly not suggesting that a system similar to what they have in the USA up until very recently is the right answer. They effectively had a $4,000 tax credit for used EVs. But it just doesn't work, does it? This idea of incentivising, because if you start off incentivising something when it's new, you're going to need to continue that, or we're going to end up in a situation like we have here. So, what's the government's response to all of this then? Because they are watching, of course. Well, Rachel Reeves announced last month that there would be a fund of 2.6 billion that would be committed to, quote, decarbonise transport. Now, the first spend from that is 400 million, which has been put to expanding the public charger network. And honestly, I think we're going to need to get a bit more creative than that to pull things out of this hole, because here's the thing. Even if there were enough chargers and they were fast enough and not too inconvenient, they're still too expensive. This is the core issue. Paying 70 or 80 pence per kilowatt hour is the equivalent to running a petrol car, which is doing low 20s to the gallon. It is just extortionate, way too expensive. And until those costs start to come down, it just isn't a realistic proposal for the half of the population who can't charge at home. Now, as to what the government, in my opinion, should be doing, Well, we'll circle back to that. How about the influx of Chinese cars then? These Chinese cars that we're seeing pop up all over the place. How does that come into play? Well, it's still early days here, to be fair, but they are definitely taking a foothold because, well, they're cheap, aren't they? That's the crux of it. The bulk of them, I suspect, will probably still transition through the corporate world because people are, understandably, going to be a bit frightened of the residuals. Why would any private buyer want to go out on a limb and buy one when it's likely to depreciate pretty heavily and the technology is likely to be surpassed in the next year or two, substantially so? The other big unknown here is the quality. Are they going to stand the test of time? No one really knows yet. If you buy a Porsche or a Volkswagen or whatever from a mainstream brand, yes, you may be paying more, but you're paying more for the extensive R&D, the testing, the more stringent quality control, and so on. If it does transpire that some of these Chinese cars are falling to bits quite quickly, then that's going to be fuel to the depreciation fire, so to speak, isn't it? So, how could the nosedive in used EV values be combated then? What should be happening here? Now, of course, this is my opinion. I'd like to hear yours as well. Please do leave it in the comments section below. I do absolutely read the comments and we get some really good discussion on videos just like this. Now, the first thing to bear in mind is we are trying to fix something here that is inherently broken. I think in the beginning, the government were looking for ways to reduce emissions. They seen electric cars, Tesla had a bit of success, and they just thought, this is it, this is what we'll go for. They put all their eggs in that basket, they committed to it, they invested into it so heavily that now, as you can see, they are absolutely loath to do any sort of U-turn or consider any other solutions, even though the shortcomings of electric vehicles, in my opinion, they're really shining through now. By nature of requiring subsidies, it tells you that natural uptake, it isn't going to plan. If something was truly a better option, the demand would be outstripping the supply, not the other way around. It's kind of economics 101, isn't it? That being said, I do think there's one fundamental thing that needs to be put in place, and it would almost certainly help the nosediving values of used EVs, and that is battery health certificates. I think it is absolutely crazy that we don't have this already because the batteries degrade at different levels. One car's battery could degrade at a completely different rate to another car, one that's been fast charging and living in a very hot or cold climate. That's far more likely to be significantly more degraded than the one that hasn't. The battery in a used EV is its value, make no mistake, and at the moment, there's really no way of knowing what the status of it is. You are effectively rolling the dice on a potential 5-figure gamble when buying a used one. Surely addressing that is the first step to giving a little bit of confidence on these, not building another 3 overpriced charger stations near your house. Now, on note of buying a used EV or any other car for that matter, do bear in mind that you should be doing a quality HPI check. This is a shout out for this video's sponsor today, and that's Vehicle Score. Now, yes, they've sponsored today's video, but that's not why I'm promoting them. I'm promoting them because they do offer you a top tier service, showing you any hidden finance, any hidden crash damage, basically everything that you need to know when buying a used car. Even if you don't want to part with money, they'll still offer a free service which will show you the good and bad points. Now, as ever, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one.